So today we're just going to go through kind of the basics of setting up a Spigot plugin with IntelliJ. I mean, if you're on Eclipse, it's going to be very similar, but I'm just going to be specifically showing you kind of the setup through IntelliJ. So the first thing that you'll need is you'll need build tools. If you just Google Spigot build tools, it'll take you right here. It's got all sorts of different links up here as to what it is and how to run things. But the basics that you need to know is you should have Java 8 installed on your system. We've got a link for it right there, so if you need that, that's right there. Next thing you'll do is right here, you can download Spigot, or you can download the build tools from their site. It'll download, and at that point, you'll just navigate to where that is in your downloads folder. And we're just gonna run a real quick command with that. Now, technically, you're supposed to open terminal here. On Windows, you can just click in the address bar and type in cmd, and that'll open it up to the directory that you're at here. If you open up terminal just regularly with the command prompt there, then you can use cd, and you can go into downloads from there. Either way, the results is the same. But from here, you're just going to type Java jar with a dash in front of it. And you're going to type build tools .jar, and if you just hit enter right there, that'll get you the latest build of Spigot. So that's going to be the latest released build for the latest version of Minecraft. If you want to use older versions or something, you're going to type -rev. So that's revision or version, essentially. And then you can just type whatever version you want. But for this, we're just going to use the latest build, which is 1.15.2. As you can see, it says I'm using Java 9, which really isn't a problem. It's just that's what's native to my computer, but I do have JDK 8 to allow me to develop plugins that are most universal to everybody. So this will take a minute to download it. I mean, essentially what it's doing is it's reaching out to Spigot's repository where they store all their code, and it's downloading that. It's compiling into a jar, making sure everything works, and so it takes a little bit of time for that to actually happen. So I'll just go ahead and pause the recording real quick, and we'll just jump to when that's done. Awesome. So when that's done, this is what you'll see. It'll say success, everything completed successfully, copying final jars. So you can go ahead and close this command prompt, and where that build tools jar was, you'll see a bunch of different folders. Spigot is specifically the one that we're going to be looking at. CraftBucket it's essentially Spigot, but Spigot has optimized a few different things. Essentially, CraftBucket was the original server, and Spigot built on top of it and kind of improved things. And since CraftBucket has kind of died out. Bucket, on the other hand, all that this is really used for is like Java docs. So that's the documentation about the plugins themselves. But for our development today, we're just going to be using the Spigot API. If we go in here to target, we can grab this right here. It's the Spigot API 115.2 R0.1 snapshot, and that's just kind of their identifier of what build it is for them with the Minecraft version. So we're just going to copy that, and when we start a new project, we'll just put it in there. So I'm just going to come in here to IntelliJ. I'm going to say new project. You want to make sure that you have Java selected and that there's nothing else selected. If you select anything else, it's just going to cause issues. I'm just going to hit next. We don't want to create from a template because that'll create a command line application, and we're not using the command line. So for this, I'm just going to change this to that folder, and I'm going to call it, let's see, Spigot, if I can type, tutorial. So I'm just going to open here. All right. So now we've got kind of this layout for things. I'm just going to create a folder, create a directory. I'm just going to name this, not resource, I'm going to name it libs for libraries. And just for sake of our understanding, I'm going to mark it as the resources root so that we understand what it's used for. Now, I'm just going to paste that same Spigot jar from earlier into there. So this is what we're going to be using. It's called a dependency because we're building things that correspond with that and help out with that. And so we're going to right click on it, and we can actually, where's the button? We can add as a library. And if we just click OK, what that does is it tells the IDE, it tells IntelliJ that anything in this project we're going to be using with that. And so it can reference that for different methods and different classes and things as we're building our plugin here. The next thing that we want to do is create a new file. We're going to call this plugin.yml. This is essentially what Spigot uses to read through and see, okay, who made this plugin, what is this plugin, where is the main class, how do we start this? So as you can see, it says that I'm missing required properties, main, name, and version. So those are the basic things that you're supposed to have in this file. So the name, we can just say Travja's Spigot tutorial. The version is going to be 1.0 because it's our first build. You can do, I mean, honestly, whatever you want. You can even put something in here and say snapshot if you want. It doesn't really matter. You can put whatever you want there. The main, this one's super important because it's telling Spigot where to start your program from. Now, we haven't added a main class yet or any packages, so we're going to do that now. So we're going to right click, we're going to say new package, and this can be whatever you want. It's common practice not to use any domains or anything that you don't own. I just like doing me.travj and then pretty much whatever the project that I'm working on is. And standard practice here is that it's all lowercase as well. So this package is essentially going to hold everything that our program runs. Now, you can add other packages to this, like, for example, we're going to use some listeners. So I'm going to put a listeners package. But the most important part here is that we have our main class. You can call it main. You can call it, I mean, honestly, whatever you want. It's really up to you. Let's see. I want that to go in the just Spigot tut package. So I'm just going to rename that for now. So that just goes in there. And then from there, I'll add back the listeners package. So our main class, it'll open up and it'll look like this. Now, in order to create a plugin, what we have to do is we have to extend or extends our Java plugin. Now you'll see that it says it's not imported. If I hit Alt-Enter, it automatically just imports that for me. So this kind of just identifies this as a plugin and in turn kind of provides some different methods in the background that help the plugin to run. So now we have this main class set up. We can come back here and we can give our path to that class. So obviously it's me.travj spigot.main. So that'll lead us right down here to that. Now, there's a few other things that you can add to this plugin.yml, but they're not really necessary. Author, you can fill that in. You can add a description, so you can say just a basic plugin, or I mean whatever you want here. Other important things to note: you can use API version. So this is really useful for kind of telling Spigot. I use a specific API. Now this was implemented in Spigot 1.13. So you can use anything from 1.13 to 1.15. Typically, if you use 1.13, it's going to be compatible 1.13 to 1.15. If you don't include anything there, it kind of just marks it as a legacy plugin, which basically means that it's an old plugin. It's meant for older versions of Minecraft. So we're just going to leave it at 1.13. Other options here are commands. If you have any commands, for this tutorial, we're not going to add any commands, but I'll just show you. Say we had a command that was just ASDF. We can add that there, add a description, and I mean that's kind of just whatever. And then there's also a permission node. If you want to attach that to a permission, you can add that. And you probably also saw that says permission message. You can make a message when they don't have permission to send to them. Another category to add here is permissions. And here you would just say, I mean, whatever, there's our permission, right? And then the default, right, is either going to be op or true. Right, so that's essentially what that's saying is either all players are going to have this permission by default or ops are going to have it. And that's kind of the basic breakdown for those permissions and the commands. So I'm just going to delete that real quick, and I can go ahead and close this because we don't need that anymore. So from here, there's some basic methods that we can use to kind of get the program up and running. So these are implemented already in the Java plugin class. If I control click on this, you can kind of see this is what it's building in the background. Now these are all methods and things that we can use from our main class. Now some that it automatically gives us by default is, let me see if I can find it in here. I've never really looked in here before. Let's see. Maybe it's actually up a level, plugin base. There it is. So the onEnable, onLoad, and onDisable. So these are methods that the Spigot runs in the background that get your plugin up and running. So we can actually take and use what's called an override. What this is saying is I'm wanting to override what's already implemented. So we're going to do public void onEnable. It has to be typed the same way that it is in here for it to recognize it as a proper override, because obviously if it's different then it's not referencing the same method. But this will kind of just get the thing up and running. Real quick here, we can just use get server, get logger.info, and we can say Spigot has been enabled. I don't know, I'm doing that in all caps, but essentially what that'll do is when the plugin starts up, when everything's finally loaded, it'll just print that out to the console. So it's the server, which is going to be Spigot, and we're just going to get the logger. And info is just, what it does is it just sends out an information message in the logger. You can use .warning. Warning just sends a warn. You can use .severe, which is an error that something broke, and you need to notify and say, hey, this didn't work how it was supposed to. So aside from that, we're just going to add a quick listener, and we're just going to register that, and that's going to be the extent of our plugin today. So we're just going to add a class, and we're going to call this, let's say, interact listener. Now, sometimes I kind of like to create a constructor here. Now, what that looks like is this just public, and that's the name of the class. Now, by default, it has a constructor that looks like this. You don't even have to type that out for this to show up. But if you want to do anything when this class is built, then you should make a constructor, and you can put, you can do whatever you want here, right? Sometimes what I'll do is if I have a class that's going to be using a lot of the stuff that I have in my main class, I'll actually add an argument to the constructor of main. Now, again, if I Alt Enter on this, it shows me kind of what needs to, like what the problem is. If I just come over it, it says, okay, there's multiple choices. We need to import one of these. So if I Alt Enter, then I can see this is my main class, and we'll just import that. Now, by importing this, I can actually add it to, well, we're going to make this private because we don't need other classes to see this. But I can add it to a variable here, so I can say this.plugin is m. So essentially, when I build this object, I'm going to map the main object to plugin, so that in other methods here, right, in other methods I can say plugin dot, for example, get server, so that I can get the server object and I can do things with that. So we're just going to leave that like that. And for this listener, what's important here is that we implement listener. So this is a class from Bucket that essentially it marks this class as a listener and provides us with some other helpful things to be able to actually listen to different events that happen in the server. This is things from, a player moving to a player getting attacked, that kind of stuff. So what we're going to do is we're going to use @EventHandler. This is an annotation that basically says the method that's going to follow is a handler for our event. So we're going to do public void, and you can name this whatever you want. I'm just going to name it interact. And then in these parentheses, we're building what kind of a listener this is. So this is going to be a player interact event, is the event we're looking for. So when we register this class as a listener, we're automatically just going to say, what happens in the background is it says, okay, any player interact event, we're going to send here and run this code. So the first thing we want to do is we want to get the player. So this will get the player that the event happened with. So we're going to go player is event.getPlayer. Now that'll return a player object. If we Alt Enter, we can import that. So this just gets the player that the event happened with. Now from here, for the sake of simplicity, we're just gonna do something to the player when they interact with anything. If you want to, you can go a little bit deeper, and you can say if event.getBlock, getClickedBlock, first off, is not null, because if it's null and we try to do something with it, it's just going to cause an error and it's not going to work. So if the clicked block is not null and the clicked block, if we get the type, this is the material, is what it's called in Spigot, but it's essentially what kind of block it is. So we can say if it is material.grass, a grass block, right? So basically what that'll say is if they click a grass block, then run the code in here, right? Like I said, for simplicity's sake, I'm just going to do something anytime they interact. So I'm just going to comment this out. In IntelliJ, the quick shortcut for that is you just select which text you want to comment, and you hit Control and then the /. So like I said, we're just going to do something when they interact here. So what I want to do is we're just going to kind of turn them into a rocket. So the easy thing for this, what we're going to do is we're going to use a method on the player object that is set velocity. Now essentially what this is doing is it's setting the direction and the speed that they're moving at. So we're just going to say new vector, and the vector, if you hit Control P, it pops up a prompt of kind of different the parameters of the vector object. So we're making a vector object when we say new. New just denotes that we're making a new object, and it's a vector. So for example, if I was making a new interact listener, I would say new interact listener, and then I'd have to put in a plugin at the main there. Now, in here, what the arguments here are the x, y, and z velocities. So if I were to put in 0 for x, 0 for y, and 0 for z, the player's not going to go anywhere. But because I want to turn them into a rocket, I'm just going to make that 1.5 f. F is basically denoting that as a float. Denoting that as a float. So essentially that's just going to say when the player interacts, we're going to set their velocity to be 1.5 in the upward direction. So that's just going to shoot them up in the air. 1.5 should honestly give them a pretty good boost. You can kind of mess around with those values to find something that you like. And if you want to shoot them off at an angle, you can change the x or the z as well. So this will probably do it for this class. So what we're going to do is we're just going to go back to main, and now we're going to register that. So the way to do that is we say get server.get plugin manager. This just kind of gets the managers of all the plugins and kind of tells what needs to be done. So then from here we can say register events, and then this is where we build our new listener. Right, so we're going to say new interact listener, and we made it so that the listener has to have a plugin, or our main. So because we're in the main in this class, we can just say this. What that does is it returns an object of the current class that we're in. And then you can see it requires us to also implement, also add a plugin as the second parameter. Now, because we extended Java plugin, this class is a plugin, so we can just type this. Now, this right here should work to turn our player into a rocket. Now, the question is, how do we build our plugin? Well, if we come over here, right-click on this, and we come down to Open Module Settings, what we're looking for is artifacts. Now we'll click the plus, create a jar from module with dependencies, so we can say just our Spigot tutorial, and you shouldn't have to change anything else here. Now what you want to change here, we don't need the extracted Spigot API to be part of our jar, because that's going to be provided by the server. So I'm just going to remove that. Now this compile output is essentially going to take everything from our source, and it's going to add it to the plugin. So because we still need the plugin.yml, we also have to add that. And so if we come in here and we say file, and we add our plugin.yml, now it'll build, compile the source, and add the plugin.yml so that Spigot knows what we're actually doing with this plugin. So if we hit apply there, that should make it so that if we come here and we hit build artifacts, it pops up this little dialog, and we can build our Spigot tutorial. So that should build. You can see it built an out right here with our artifacts. If you come down here, you can see the jar there. We're just going to navigate to it here in our Explorer, so we can copy this jar. Now, what we're gonna do with this jar is we're gonna take it. I built just a folder here with a basic server startup. Now, when build tools runs, in that same directory, you'll see Spigot 1.15.2.jar. This is the server jar. So we're just going to copy that, and we can go into our test server and paste it there. So the basic thing that you'll need to run the server is a batch file. That's what this is. I just put a plus in front of it so it's always at the top of the other files. But if I edit this, this is essentially what you'll need to run the Spigot jar. What's really important here is just this line. Essentially what it's saying is we're going to start Java, we're going to run Java with 1 GB of RAM minimum with 2 GB of RAM maximum. You can mess with these values to whatever your computer can handle or whatever you need. This is just denoting the garbage collection, which is essentially cleaning up objects that aren't used anymore and that kind of thing. But then we say we're running a jar, and then we put the name of the jar, and pause basically just says at the end of the application, don't just close the console, wait for input. So with that in here, we can just double click this, and it'll start the server. It'll build up everything. And so as you can see, it actually opens up another console window. This is just, this is in case you wanted to use the other version. I honestly like just using the console. But you can use this too if you want. It shows you your memory usage, and it can show you your players online as well. Now, if you were just to run the batch file, it wouldn't load all this up. If you saw before, I actually had the EULA, the EULA. Basically, you have to set that to true, and what that's saying is you agree with Minecraft's end user license agreement, which simple enough. So I'm just going to stop this real quick now that everything's loaded up. And you'll see we have all these different files. There's a plugins folder now. This is where we'll actually drop our tutorial file. Now that everything's here, I'm going to go ahead and start this back up again. And everything should load up. While that's loading, I'm just going to open Minecraft. Oh, okay, so it looks like we had an error there. So if we come up here, the name contains invalid characters, so I can't put an apostrophe there. Alright, let's do that, and then we can build this again. Build artifacts, build, and we'll come back here, and we can grab that file again, copy it over, go back to our server. Now the cool thing is, most of the time you can just take and paste that over, replace the file, and you can come back here and just hit reload, and it'll load back up. Now, as you can see, it says that it's not supported when using some plugins. Most of the time, you'll be all right. Okay, I also can't use the space character. So we're just going to take, and we're going to name this Spigot tutorial, and we'll call that good. So we're going to build that again. Come back here. Grab that file. And we're going to come back and put it in there. So we're going to reload, and you can see it's been enabled. So we're just going to start up Minecraft. And when that loads up, we'll see here that if I join just my local host, so nothing's happening at the moment, right? but if I click anywhere, I jump up. Now obviously that hurt really bad, but yeah, see if I jump around the water, you can see that. And I can actually just use that to kind of fly around. So it's kind of interesting how this works, because right-click in the interact event doesn't get fired if you're not clicking on a specific block. So I can click that all I want, but it doesn't go anywhere. But if I click on a block, then it shoots me up. But if I left-click, then that just shoots me around all the time. The other interesting thing with this, if I go ahead and opt myself real quick, if I go, if I go into creative and I get a pressure plate, the interesting thing is the interact event is actually run when you interact with pressure plates and buttons and that kind of thing as well. So it's, I don't know, it's kind of fun to mess around with, but I mean that's kind of the basics of everything and kind of registering those events. I'll get into commands and those kind of things in a later episode. But thank you so much for watching.